I think we're all set to go.
Okay, let's get started here. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Okay, do we have any historians in here? Any professors of history? Okay. Well, anyway, I just want to say that I am not a historian. I am a researcher. I do a lot of research on different subjects. This is one of the favorite subjects here. And I'm not going to cut into a country western song. But this is the way I dress all the time, except when I'm out exercise. Let me tell you how I got started. 1967, I read a book by James Pearson. It's called Marching Toward Freedom. And in it, McPherson quoted a historian from 1928 that made the statement, and this is the way the statement goes in quotation. He said, "The American Negro is the only race of people that I know of on the face of the earth that did nothing to affect their freedom." And right away, I was wondering why, I don't know what kind of credentials he had. But it was from McPherson's book, he quoted him. And naturally, being included, I had to do something about that. So I started doing research as a young man and was quite successful in finding out a lot of stuff, especially as it relates to the Civil War. Well, in 1980, about 84, 85, I think, I was invited up to Gettysburg to speak, or at least I thought I was invited up to speak. I didn't know that I was going to be part of a forum. And so you can imagine when I got there and I saw this long table with all the chairs, and there was all these people that I recognized that was writers of history and professors of history sitting there. Well, I thought about that big. And so afterwards, what happened was I was talking to some of the writers and asking them about how they went about formulating their stories. And there was about 6 or 7 of us there in the group. And to a man, they all said, well, what we actually do is if you can find letters that are written, you can kind of get some idea of what was going on, what people were thinking. And so I said, that makes sense. And so since I knew about the U.S. color troops, my next question to them was, well, have anybody found any letters from the U.S. color troops? And they said, well, all of the letters that has been found really had no real substance to them, and it didn't give you any idea of what they were thinking. So naturally, once again, I said, no, I got to find out about this. And so then I began to study and dig and dig and dig until, lo and behold, I found all these letters, hundreds of copies of letters written to newspapers throughout the North. Letters that were written to loved ones by the U.S. color troops. Now you have to remember, you couldn't send the letters to the South, because if they knew you were a slave and they knew how to read, you were in trouble. So most of the letters that I really put a lot of emphasis on were letters that were written to the newspaper. And today I'm going to read some of them to you. Now, in his book, S.K. Whitney Davis, I know you all never heard of him, because that's me. And my first 2 manuscripts have not been published yet. But anyway, what I talked about in the beginning of that is that it appears that we have selective amnesia because we don't remember all these things when it comes to catastrophes and stuff like that going on. We seem to have a short memory. See, at the beginning, at the Battle of Bunker Hill, no one seems to remember that it was Peter Salem that drew his weapon, fired, and mortally wounded the Marine major as they were charging up at Bunker Hill. And when he did that, that stopped the charge. And Salem Poor, another black man. And it just goes on, and then all of a sudden, they're forgotten about. It's never happened. But anyway, when you work your way on up to the Civil War, 1861, that was the question. Because there was a lot of Americans of African descent that wanted to join the army because they thought it was an affront to God and everybody else that these people were rebelling from the Union, trying to rebel from the Union. And so you had things like this that went up, calling for the colored men to join the Union Army, to join the ranks. And they were begging, they were pleading. And I don't know what happened. Oh my God, we were supposed to roll that to another section. But anyway, it was just going on everywhere. And so they started to join, and they came by the hundreds, and they came by the thousands. And when I think about this historian in 1928 that made that statement, obviously he didn't know there was 142 regiments of Americans of African descent. Two of them right here in Atlanta, the 136th Regiment and the 138th Regiment, was right here. And so I began to dig and dig and dig and finding out different things. And one of the things that struck me, and I'm going to read some of the letters here. And you have to bear with me here because I have to change glasses from reading to the reading glasses. Yeah. A most interesting letter here, and this is from a lady whose son had joined the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, which you've seen particularly in Florida. Her name was Hannah Johnson. She wrote this letter in July 1863. And it's such an eloquent letter here that I can't leave it out. She starts out, "Excellent sir, my good friend says, I must write to you." And she was simple. "My son went in the 54th Regiment. I'm a colored woman, and my son was strong and able and able to fight for himself. The colored people have as much to fight for as any. My father was a slave, and I escaped from Louisiana before, or rather he escaped from Louisiana before I was born, more than 40 years ago. I have but poor education, but I never went to school. But I know as well as any what is right between man and man. Now, I know it's right for a colored man should go and fight for his country, and so also a white man. I know that a colored man ought to run no greater risk than a white. His pay is no greater, his obligation to fight is the same. So why should not our enemies be compelled to treat them the same? Made to do it. My son fought at Fort Wagner, but thank God he was not taken prisoner as many were. I thought of this thing before I let my boy go, but then I said, Mr. Lincoln will never let them sell our colored soldiers to they do, he will get them back quick. He will retaliate and stop it. Now, Mr. Lincoln, don't you think you ought to stop this thing and make them do the same by the colored man? They have lived in idleness all their lives on stolen labor, excuse me, and made savages of the colored people. But they now are so furious because they are proving themselves to be men, such as, or some of which have come away and got some education. It must not be so. We must put the rebels to work in state prisons to making shoes and things that they sell our colored soldiers, so they let them all go, and also give their wounded the same treatment. It would sound cruel, but there is no other way. A just man must do hard things sometimes. That will show him to be a great man. They tell me, some do, that you will take back the proclamation. Don't do it. When you're dead and in heaven in 1,000 years, that action of yours will make angels sing your praise. I know it. Ought one man to own another? Lawful? No. Who made this law? Surely the poor slave did not. It is wicked and a horrible outrage. There is no sense in it, because a man that lived by robbing all his life and his father before him, should he complain because of stolen things found on him? Taken. Robbing the colored people of their labors was a small part of the robbery of their souls. They are made brutes all too often. But you know all about this. Will you see that the colored men fighting now are fairly treated? You ought to do this and do it at once. Not let the thing run along. Meet it quickly and manfully, and stop this mean coward cruelty we poor press runs appeal to you in a fair play. I was moved by that because as I researched, I began to find out some things, and she had a right to be concerned. Because not only were they taking that threat serious about putting these black men back in slavery, and they were captured, but also found out as time went on in just about every battle that they fought, the wounded that was left out on the field, the Confederates went through and indiscriminately killed them, the ones that lay wounds on the battlefield. And that happened in just about every battle that was fought. And there is letters written, one in particular, that was written by a surgeon in that particular time. And his name was A.C. Heckle. And he was with the 8th United States Colored Troops, and they were fighting in Lusty, Ocean Pond, Florida, in that battle. Excuse me. And what happened, as usual, in this decisiveness, poor intelligence, and all the other things that went with that, caused a massacre. The commanding general was told not to go any further than Jacksonville. But seeking glory, he decided to go on. He had no intelligence as to what was ahead. And so he went on. And so they actually was just cut to pieces at the Battle of Old Lusty. The Confederates were waiting for them. And, they were able to just almost destroy, especially the 8th U.S. Colored Troops. And so Hannah Johnson had a reason to worry, because this is going on. And it was going on in several different places, and just about every battle that I discovered that they took part in. And but Heckle was criticized after policing the battlefield of the wounded at the Battle of Old Lusty. He was criticized because he was going out picking up all the U.S. colored troops and loading them in. He only had 3 ambulances. and he was trying to load as many as he could. He was criticized for it, but his reply was, I know not what's going to happen to the colored soldiers, to the white soldiers. They're most likely to be taken prisoner. But I know what they're going to do to the colored soldiers. So he was trying to save as many as possible. And there's many letters that attest to that written by troops from the 8th U.S. Colored Troops. And so he went on, and he had to go before a board, and that was his explanation as to why he was doing what he was doing. But I also found letters from Confederate soldiers, and it confirmed everything that was said. Now, these are personal letters, and these letters belong to the daughters of the Confederates. Okay, and so I don't have the permission to read those letters, but I can read excerpts from them. And in most cases, there was from the 64th Georgia Regiment, from the 19th, I think it was, and they described what happened. And they, in one very vivid description, one of the soldiers, and I think he was from the 64th Georgia Regiment, he said they really lit into them. And when he walked out on the battlefield, all he could see was a bunch of woolly heads. And he said they went through, and the colored soldiers was begging for mercy, but they were not giving them any. They were indiscriminately killing everyone they could. So they those letters are in someone else's possession, and they're personal letters, so I don't have the authorization to read them. But the health and concern of the wounded, it was of great concern. And I have a letter here from a James H. Payne, who was a sergeant and a quartermaster with the 27th U.S. Colored Infantry. He wrote this from Richmond. And he goes on to say, permit me the privilege through your worthy column to give your readers a brief historical introduction to our very worthy and eminent sister and mother in the Army, Lydia Penn. Now, you've heard of Clara Barton. How many of you ever heard of Lydia Penn? Very few. But Lydia Penn was a nurse. He goes on to say, Sister Penny was born a slave in Blount County, East Tennessee, in the year of our Lord, 1814, at the time of the Indian War, when General Winfield Scott and General Johnny Wood drove the Indians from their habitations in Tennessee. Sister Penny served 2 years as a cook. She was at the time only a girl, but she informed me that she subsequently became the mother of a family of children whose championship she had long been deprived of through rather companionship through slavery, and that she was left a widow to suffer the torments of cruel oppression. She was finally sold to a Dutch butcher in Memphis, Tennessee. By this time, she had learned to trust in God, who had promised to deliver the oppressed and to open the prison doors to them that are bound. She said that she had a falling out with her Dutch mistress about something, and that she gave her master and mistress both to understand distinctly that she intended to run away from them, which threat she carried into effect about 1 week after it was made, by which time they thought that she had become contented to remain with them. Sister Penny says that she kept herself concealed among her friends in Memphis until the Union Army had extended its line near the city. When she made her way within its lines and again engaged herself as a cook, here she says, being alone with her and having no one in particular to befriend or protect her, Prudence dictated the propriety of making a selection of a companion, which she did as soon as she found one, who she thought would treat her as a wife and act the part of a faithful husband by her. While in the Army, she formed the acquaintance with Mr. Penny, a native of Pennsylvania, who had enlisted as a servant in 3 months service. They finally came to the city of Cincinnati, Ohio, where Thomas Penny, her husband, re-enlisted in the service to join the 5th United States Colored Troops at Camp Delaware, Ohio. Sister Penny said that she felt it to be her duty to go along with her husband, not merely on account of the love she had for him, but also for the love which she had for her country, that the cause which nerved the soldiers to pour out their lives for was her cause, and that of her race, and that she felt it to be her Christian duty to do all she could for the liberty of her afflicted and downtrodden race. The good woman is called by those who are acquainted with her the Mother of the Army. She well deserves the name, for she has been in the service ever since the rebellion broke out, or very nearly as long. Sister Penny says that she is not tired of the service, nor does she think of leaving the field until the last gun is fired and peace is declared, and every slave is freed from captivity. Many of our officers and men who were wounded at the Battle of Deep Bottom, that's in Virginia, in July the 7th, 1864, will never forget the kind deeds of Sister Lydia Penny, who went among them and administered to their wants as they lay weltering in their blood on the banks of the James near Jones Landing. There she could be seen, the only woman present, like an angel from above, giving words of cheer and doing all her power to relieve the suffering of the wounded and dying. Yes, while others stood aloof, thinking themselves too good even to go near enough to give them a drink of water to quench their burning thirst, Sister Penny was seen like a ministering angel, or one of those holy women in primitive days who ministered to Christ and his apostles. She gave them water to drink and bread to eat and assisted the surgeons in dressing their wounds. When the wounded was placed on the boat to be taken to the hospital at Fortress Monroe, she left her tent and all behind and went on board the boats to minister to their comfort. When they were delivered into the hands of a careful nurse, Sister Penny returned to her tent, where she ever waits to administer to the wants of the afflicted soldier. Her husband seems to be much of a gentleman. I hope that all Christians who shall be permitted to read this short statement of Sister Penny's life and character will pray for her. I can assure them they will pray for a worthy woman. Very, very, very touching. Now, Lydia Penny was not the only one, nor was Clara Barton that attended to the soldiers, Confederate and Union soldiers. There was thousands of women that took that role. One of them, if you get a chance and go up to the Marietta National Cemetery, there's a woman buried there named Emma Stevenson. Emma took care of the Union soldiers, and she was buried. The soldiers, as I understand it, are here, and she's buried a little bit up above them. And her wish was that she would be buried there so she could continue to watch over those soldiers even in death. So I thought that was very touching. But some of the interesting things about the Civil War is everybody were not actually grown men that took part. There was a lot of boys. I think they said that 10% of the Confederate forces may have been young boys, and maybe 5 to 8% were the Union. And a very interesting letter here from Isaac Wood of Company D, 41st U.S. Colored Infantry, Fort Harrison, Virginia. Fort Harrison and the Battle of Chapin Farm and all of that was part of the whole thing there. And this is from Sergeant Wood. This is written to the Christian Recorder, March the 18th in the 1865 edition. And he goes on to say, while passing through one of the hospital wards recently, I caught the eye of a little boy who looked just as if he desired to talk to him. So I went over to him and said, well, my little fellow, what is the trouble with you? And he said, oh, no trouble, sir. Only I've lost a leg. You are a young hero to be shouldering a musket. I wasn't a soldier, sir. I was the captain's waiter. Well, how did you come then to get in the way of a ball? I didn't, sir. It got in my way. I wanted to let it pass, but it wouldn't, and it took my leg off. What are you going to do when you get well? Going back to the captain, sir. He will take care of me. Such a brave little fellow, only 12 years old, and yet a hero. Regardless of the danger, he had followed his captain to the field and failed for the impulses that led him among the veterans soldiers of Grant's army. He was material, he had the material in him of which soldiers were made. And had he been a soldier, been older and stronger, would have been quick to shoulder his musket and defend the Union. I thought that was a very interesting one. One of the things that I think is lost on in the dialogue is that most of these battles in the Civil War was fought in the South. First time Lee ventured out of Army ventured out of the South and had made their way up through the Shenandoah into Pennsylvania with the intentions of coming down through Gettysburg and taking Washington. He was soundly defeated. So it leads me to think that, it's kind of strange to, when you fight a battle and you fight it on someone else's battlefield, they're going to have the advantage. They know the area. They know the terrain. So it's quite interesting in today's time for that battle at Gettysburg. For years and years and years and years, it was always thought that it was Buford's cavalry that first saw Ewell and Longstreet Corps headed up through Maryland on their way to Pennsylvania. But by checking the records, and now they give the credit to an escaped slave, his name escapes me right now. He was from the Culpeper plantation, Culpeper, Virginia. And he was on his way, running away, and was headed up to Maryland trying to get to the Union line. Well, he actually saw Ewell and Longstreet Corps on the move. And as soon as he got to the Union line, he reported that to Hooker. And of course, you had to substantiate it, so Hooker wants to know, well, how do you know it was Ewell and Longstreet Corps? Well, Charlie Wright was his name. He went on to explain to him what Ewell's Corps flag looked like and what Longstreet Corps flag looked like. And so it was at that point that Hooker dispatched Buford's cavalry up to Shattleton through the Shenandoah Valley. And sure enough, that was where they were headed. And so that was how the Union got to the high ground first. It was not Buford's cavalry that actually got the idea, but they got the information from Charlie Wright, an escaped slave from the Culpeper plantation. And a lot of that went on. There was a lot of intelligence that was gathered from the what they call contraband. slaves. And contraband was just, it was a way of getting around the law, because there was a fugitive slave law that said that once if you had a slave in your possession, by law you had to give it back. And so Butler decided that we would call these contrabands rather than fugitives, so that way we wouldn't have to give it back. This is for the war, so we're taking that. So it was very, very, very interesting. Here's a very interesting letter here, and I don't know, I think that everyone should really impress upon their children the importance of education and really getting a really good education. This letter was written to the Weekly Anglo-African, which is a weekly newspaper, August 12, 1865 edition. And this was written by George Thomas. He was with the 12th U.S. Colored Artillery and Battery L. It goes on to say, I was born in Nelson County, Kentucky, and lived there until I was 18 years of age, at which time I went to Louisville, and was in that city when the late horrid rebellion broke out. I enlisted in the 12th U.S. Colored Artillery in the fall of 1864, and my only sorrow is that I did not enlist sooner. I left a home such as would have made a slave happy, as long as there was a grain of happiness to be found in slavery. While living in Nelson County, I indeed thought that it right that all colored people should be slaves. And I was far from being the only one having that same opinion. But oh, how different now. There were 5 or 6 colored people in the county who believed they were disliked very much by white people in that county. So you see, although we are capable of being taught, the fear of our masters and mistresses kept us bound in the frontiers of ignorance. A man could not visit his wife living a mile from him, scarcely once a week, and any infringement on any rule was followed by at least 100 lashes. But thanks be to God, those troubled days have passed away forever. At that time, those cruel practices were not strange to me. Neither did I think the masters cruel until I was, by the providence of God, partly released from ignorance by learning to read. Then I saw that slavery was contrary to the laws of God and debasing to man. Things like this caused me to look forward, hoping and praying for the time at which these things must end. And behold, the time has come, and I see as were a nation born on a day, men and women coming forth from slavery, start drinking to the noonday sunshine of the greatness of God's gift, liberty. And he goes on to talk about how, at this time the government was taking care of their wives. Often asked an illustrator that I was using, asking some very pointed questions about what happened to the families of the soldiers as they went off to war, and the ones that were in the north especially, because they had jobs and they were making money. And what happened was there were societies that were put together to help them. And the women that was left behind, they were very good at going out and gathering stuff, getting newspapers together, magazines, or whatever of that day, and then having shipped off. And according to the U.S. Postal Service, that they were doing everything they possibly could to make sure that the soldiers got their letters, and the letters that the soldiers wrote got back to their loved ones at home. And it was quite interesting in reading their information. The one thing that you may remember about the Massachusetts, 54th Massachusetts, and in their adventure, is that they had a problem with pay, and they went for quite some time without taking any pay, and they were very adamant about it, and they made some good arguments. A letter was written to Abe Lincoln by James Henry Goody, and Goody, if you want to listen about, he was an extremely interesting character. His gravestone is down at Andersonville. He was wounded at the Battle of Olustee, and while a lot of the U.S. colored troops were killed, he was not. And many, many years ago, when I first found that out, and I started to research, why wasn't Goody killed? He was U.S. colored troops. Well, I went back and I found papers where Goody signed on to a whaling ship when he was 19 years old out of New Bedford, Massachusetts, and they gave a description of Goody. It appears that Goody was a very light-skinned mulatto with large curls. So it's obvious that the Confederates probably thought that he was white, so they didn't kill him. And he eventually died some months later. He died at Andersonville, and they have a gravestone down there for him. But here's a letter to a Christian recorder dated January 2nd, 1864. And it's talking about pay. And what the person goes on to say is, we don't wish you to look upon us as being inclined to be a little stubborn. We were told that we would be accepted by the U.S. government from the same term and reducing pay and receiving part pay from the state of Massachusetts. And apart from the government of the same, if you look at it in that way, you don't look at it as we do. Massachusetts has always been first to open the door to the colored man. It was first to send 2 colored regiments in the field to extinguish the last spark of the most infamous rebellion, one that will figure largely in the annals of history for centuries to come. You sit at your fireside and you just study a little, and what the poor soldiers suffered, you have no idea, and just you fight. No idea, and just you fight and slay the rebels that are at our backs, or we will fight them that are in front of us, or fight in Congress for our right, and we will fight there, or fight here for yours. I feel proud, and so does every other man that belongs to the 55th Massachusetts, to think that they stand so well upon the principles which they came here to fight for. Our pride has won us a name amongst the white regiments around us. They call us the Independent Colored Regiment and say to us, you do the work that we ought to share in, and they don't. And they don't pay you anything for it. Do you want to break that spirit of pride? I hope not. And as you say, that we have proved ourselves worthy of approbation, don't put our principles up on the grindstone. We love this government and will sacrifice our lives to maintain it. Just think for a moment. Reflect deeply that there is good for you to gain by it. Our lives we value just as highly as you do yours. But without a stimulant, our exertions would not be worth anything. Let our faces be black, but our hearts be true. You will find us true and loyal and obedient in all qualities pertaining to a soldier. A true and rather singular idea for a colored man in which to be placed on equal footing with the white man. Why not? Can't we fight just as well? We showed our qualities at Fort Gibson and Wagner. Now, if there is not pluck, and that bravery. Just fall in some big hole and we will guarantee to pull you out without flashing your hand. Fall down and we will pick you up. We won't pass by and perhaps give you a kick off or a cuff to pick you up, carry you home to your good wife, and won't ask you or your daughter for compensation. Anyway, all the compensation that we ask to give us our rights, and don't be dodging around every corner as if you owed us something. And our conscience is getting the upper hand on you, or rather, your conscience is getting the upper hand on you. Our motto: liberty and equality. Nice thing. The last one here that I'm going to read is from a chaplain. Well, this is not the last one. The next is the last. And his name was Garland H. White, and he was with the 28th U.S. Colored Infantry, and he wrote this August 8, 1864. This is a letter written to the Christian Recorder in the August 20th, 1864 edition. Of course, normally I would have a glossary. The Christian Recorder was a Methodist weekly newspaper. And there were so many other newspapers from small towns in the north where these letters were written to the editor. And when you go back and look at the macros, they're on the macrofiche, they're there. I mean, hundreds of them, thousands of them are there. And they were printed. And this one is from Garland H. White, the chaplain, and it says it's at the Battle of Petersburg. And if you don't know about the Battle of Petersburg, on one up above Richmond, and both of them was very heavily fortified. And it had been under siege for quite some time. And the generals thought that if we could overrun Petersburg in Richmond, that opens doors to Richmond. And so we would end there. And so they decided what they would do is they would tunnel under the Confederate fortifications. And they tunneled in, I'm not exactly sure how, I did know exactly how deep they went in under. And they packed about 4,000 pounds of explosives under there. And it was under two different forts. And they blew it. And after they blew it, the thing Burnside was supposed to send the 4th Regiment of U.S. Colored Troops in to overrun the Confederates at Petersburg. Well, indecisiveness played a great part in this because he hesitated after it was blown, and the Confederates had time to regroup and move up to where they had blew this big crater, and as the 4th U.S. Colored Troops and the other troops were trying to come up out of that 30-foot deep hole, it was a massacre because the Confederates had to stand there and shoot down after them. And so he's talking about this, and he's read accounts in the newspaper, and he's really upset. And he goes on to say, I should remain perfectly silent so far as the action on the 30th is concerned. But for one reason, which when presented, I hope the public will accept as being philosophic as well as patriotic. It is said by a large number of cowards at home that the colored troops under General Burnside, who participated in the recent attack on Petersburg, acted cowardly. This slanderous language I first saw in the New York Herald on the 6th. It being a paper familiar with political corruption, it did not astonish me to find such clammy heaped upon and innocent and brave people laboring under disadvantage and unparalleled in the history of civilized warfare. These colored troops, who were from New York, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, and several of the slave states, were led by as brave white men as the country could afford. Our friends at home need not think that the failure to accomplish the design of that memorable event on that day grew out of any neglect or incompetency upon our regiment or company commanders, nor even the men themselves, or as eyewitnesses to the whole affair. I am compelled, from every consideration of justice for my profession, my God, my country, and my regiment, to make some statements respecting the true nature of the case. And he goes on to say, at a given hour, all the officers of the colored troops were notified to have their men in readiness and at a certain place. This order was carried out to the crossing of a T. Afterwards, a charge was made, and every officer heading his men, and the troops seemed as though they were going to a camp meeting or to a 1st of August dinner. I was with the boys and intended to follow them to the last. Just at this juncture, the earth began to shake, as though the hand of God intended a reversal of the laws of nature. This grand conversion sent both soil and soul to inhabit the air for a while, and then return to be commingled forever with each other as the word of God commands. From dust thou art, and to dust thou shalt return. By this time, the colored troops had been sufficient. It had seemed sufficient to them of a mighty struggle which would soon follow, and many began to make preparation accordingly. Some by saying to me, I want you, Brother White, to write my father and my mother in New York, or Philadelphia, Chicago, or Boston, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and other places, that I, George Thomas, John, Peter, or any other name, today died like a man. And when payday comes, if it ever does come, send that money that is due to my wife. And tell her to raise Sally, Mary, Polly, or whomever in fear of the Lord. The colonel gave the order, fixed bayonet, charged bayonet. The last words to me were, Brother White, goodbye. Take care of yourself, for today someone must die. And if it be me, I hope our people will get the benefit of that. I must be plain in my remarks, though it should offend somebody. The first division of colored troops who led the charge were those who were principally raised in slave states. They did not stand up to the work like those from the free states. But when the second division of troops went into the action, they charged over the first and carried 2 lines of rifle pits. They made no stop there. Our gallant Colonel Charles Russell of Indiana, who led the gallant 28, told the boys that he intended leading them to Petersburg and that day. Colonel John A. Bross, who led the 29th of Illinois Colored Regiment, told his boys the same thing. Now, I would have people at home, both white and colored, to understand that the victory of that day was as certain as ours as anything could be. I call upon all the candy-hearted men who stood and saw the affair from beginning to end to corroborate what I say, and it makes a statement. When I saw our colors waving over the enemy's works, I, with a number of others, said, boys, the day is ours. Petersburg Street. For several rods, the dead lay sick, both white and colored, Union and rebel. It was a sad sight. Recollect the colored troops went as far as they were ordered to go and did just what they were told to do, both in going and remaining there and coming out. The brave officers who led them. When they saw that bad management had taken place somewhere, and thinking that remaining longer would endanger the portion of the army, through wisdom and good policy, offered to retreat. This statement is the truth, and I'm willing to take my solemn oath, leave no ground for a set of cowards at home, like Bennett and other foul-hearted buzzards, to attribute the loss that day to the arms of the colored troops. None of the troops, white or colored, are responsible for the actions of the general. Let every man answer before the tribunal of his country for himself, generals as well as privates. For he has grown to be responsible for his conduct in common with all men. I hold that there be no higher sin in all the world than to blame innocent people for consequences for which they are not responsible. I care not for it is whether king or subject, general or private, it makes no difference with me. On a point of explanation, rather exposing the truth. What was lost by Jersey, rather by first division, was amply recovered by the second. Garland White was a Methodist minister, and it's quite interesting how he, when he was at Richmond once, we took over Richmond. As soon as Lee Army left Richmond, the U.S. colored troops moved into Richmond. They were the first one to get into Richmond. And Garland White, while you're going into Richmond and all the throngs of slaves and everybody just gathered in the street, and so the commanding officer asked him if he would make a statement, if he would speak to the crowd. And, he said, well, I took that opportunity. But he said to see thousands of slaves, just dancing and shouting and praising God for their freedom, it got to him. And so he had to step down off the podium. But as he was going along, someone brought this lady up to him. And she began to question him and said, what's your full name? He was Auburn H. White. Where were you born? I was born in Richmond. How did you leave Richmond? I ran away. Where did you run to? I ran to Canada. What did you do after that? Well, I worked in Canada, went to school, and when the war broke out, I came and joined the Army. And so he said, well, what was your mother's name? And so he said, what was his mother's name? And she said, Garland, my son. He had come back to Richmond, and in all that throng of slaves, his mother recognized him. And that was awesome. But my last one here is it will give you some idea of how things were going. And this is from George Washington Harris, who was with the first U.S. colored infantry. And he goes on to say, you are aware that Wilson Landing is on the James River, a few miles above Jamestown, the very spot where the first sons of Africa were landed in 1620. If my memory serves me right, and from that day, the breaking out of the rebellion was looked upon as an inferior race by all civilized nations. But behold what has been revealed in the past 3 or 4 years. Why, the colored man have ascended upon a platform of equality, and slaves can now apply the lash to the tender flesh of their master. To this day I am now an eyewitness of that fact. The country being principally inhabited by wealthy farmers, there are a great many men in the regiment who are refugees from this place. While out on a foraging expedition, we captured a Mr. Clayton, a noted rev in this part of the country, and from his appearance, one of the FFV, which is the first family of Virginia. On the day before we captured him, several colored women that belonged to Mr. C, who had given them a most unmerciful whipping previous to their departure on the arrival of Mr. C in camp, The commanding officer determined to let the women have their revenge and ordered Mr. C to be tied to a tree in front of headquarters. And William Harris, a soldier in our regiment and a member of Company E who was acquainted with the gentleman and who used to belong to him, was called upon to undress him and introduce him to the ladies that I mentioned above before. Mr. Harris played his part conspicuously, bringing the blood from his loins at every stroke and not forgetting to remind the gentleman of the days gone by. After giving him some 15 to 20 well-directed strokes, the ladies, one after another, came up and gave him a life number to remind him that they were no longer his, but safely housed in Abraham's bosom and under the protection of the Star-Spangled Banner and guarded by their own patriotic, though once downtrodden race. Oh, that I had the tongue to express my feelings while standing up on the banks of the James River on the soil of Virginia, the mother state of slavery, as a witness of such sudden reverse. The day is clear, the fields of grain were beautiful, and the birds were singing sweet melodious songs, while poor Mr. C is crying to his servant for mercy. That all who sympathize with the South take this narrative for a miracle. So, a lot of times, as the U.S. colored troops took part in battles in certain areas, it's not strange for them to run into their former master. And some of them didn't take the same road as these particular people, because some of them having at some point been introduced to religion and trying to live by the teachings of Jesus, decided that revenge in that way was not the proper thing for them, but forgiving was. So many things happen. The dialogue has been the same for more than 130 years, because this is the 150th anniversary of the beginning of the Civil War. But now you know a little bit of the rest of the story. If we can run through these. Probably do the rest of the story. I'll explain a little bit about what's when they were asked to come, they came horseback, they came walking, and they were asked to join the recruiting statement. All of these from the archives in Washington. There they are, about 100, about 1,000. That was a troop out of Ohio. About 20,000 black men served on board the ship. Strange that by 1928, the gentleman that was supposed to be the historian, it's strange that he didn't know that by that time 25, well, no, 24 black men had been awarded the highest award in the Netherlands. And there was more than that was awarded, but William Carney, who was the first one to actually put in force, it wasn't until some almost 40 years later that he was awarded. And here in the last few years, Andrew Jackson Smith was awarded his Medal of Honor. Now this happened in 1864, 65, and was only in Bill Clinton's second term as president, he awarded the Lebanon. And there was several Navy men that about 6 or 7 of them that won the Medal of Honor, and the rest of them was next to it. And as you can see, it's a little bit grainy here, but it's some young boys in front of the tent with Civil War uniforms on. And this is back in 18. But this is a hospital scene here. And it wasn't unusual to have a hospital in the open market. And they were busy doing everything that surgeons would do, amputating, removing walls. And, it was really horrific because the balls that they shot in those infield rifles was actually tear you to pieces. It was worse than an M16 today because once it hit you, it was going to destroy a bone. That's why they have so many amputations, legs and arms. Okay? And this, believe it or not, this is a hospital, a U.S. Colored Hospital in Nashville. Okay? And this right here is just a picture of U.S. Colored providing medical assistance to one of the surgeons. Okay? And this is part of a group of hospitals north of here back in 1865. And this right here, one of the reasons I put this up is because they, you see that flag there? Most of these, a great number of U.S. colored troops are really proud of the flag. And the way that they got these flags here, these flags was made and paid for by some women of different areas. The Stars and Stripes came to them as part of being the government. But their regimental and flags, money was raised. And they were very proud of it. Next. And this is just what we were getting, being extras on a movie, North and South Korea. I thought it was really nice to see those women dressed up in that kind of dress today. And they had these kind of societies and organizations that these women would belong to, and they raised money and they would go around and ask for different things like food, tobacco, to the soldiers. And this is just them organizing, getting set up to organize their activities. And that's just a picture from the U.S. soldiers. Okay? Of course, show the ending of the show that I did Saturday, the Veterans Day, to recognize all the men who died in all of the world. This brings an end to that thing. I'm going to open it up to questions if any of you have questions. It was a little bit disjointed because normally there is 3 of us. And we keep the continuity going by each person knowing which level. And normally I'm just a narrator. But trying to get people to do things not for money is hard. No one want to do something unless they get paid. Yes, sir. Couple questions. One, Emma Stevenson, can you tell us a little bit more about her? Yeah, the best place to find out more about her